Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Hill Country Region Distinguished Speaker Series event. We would like to welcome Bruce Canepa tonight, and this is, of course, presented by Speed City Racing. And Bruce will be interviewed by the mayor of Speed City, Les Kiser. Before we get to the interview, though, here's our region president, Charlie Sparks.
Carl, thank you so much, and I want to also send my congratulations out to everyone who's able to sign up and join us for tonight. So thank you so much to those of you who were able to carve out some time tonight, both within Hill Country Region as well as we've got guests from around Zone 5 within the Porsche Club of America. So that's awesome. Les, appreciate you doing the honors tonight, and Bruce, welcome. Thank you so much for your time, and we're going to all kick back and have fun with this. Thanks.
All righty. Well, thanks, Charlie, and welcome to the rest of the Texas Porsche crowd. Great to have you. Now, this one's a bit interesting. I got to tell you, I really don't know Bruce that well. We've got some common friends who have introduced us, and I know Bruce from probably the articles that you've read, his shop walks. Those are really entertaining. If you haven't seen any of those, go to YouTube and check out Bruce's shop walks. A lot of fun, a great insight to it. But and I purposefully have not spent much time speaking to Bruce just because I want the fresh introduction right here. So Bruce, thanks for joining us. This is great. I know you've been around the Porsche community and the family quite a bit, but thanks for joining us tonight.
No, thank you. It's my pleasure.
All righty. So, folks, we're going to start off with some easy things for Bruce. Then we're going to see what kind of things he'll say that'll get him in trouble or tell us about other trouble, and we're just going to roll with it. So, one of the things that I was curious about with Bruce, I know some of the racing, and so let's ask, what is your earliest recall of high-performance vehicles, and where did that take place, Bruce?
Actually, it was a bug go-kart, and I think I was 10 or 11. I think I was 10. I'm not sure. And my neighbors had go-karts, and my dad said if I earned half of what it cost to buy it, he'd put up the other half. So I did that, and I had a bug go-kart, and we lived in a neighborhood where there was alleys behind the houses, and so the alleys were the racetracks. So that's where it started.
That sounds like fun. I had a similar story, but I was on a mini bike, and we did have the one cranky neighbor down the street that complained about all his kids on mini bikes zipping up and down. But tell us about your path into racing.
God, I think it was just kind of happenstance. I mean, I liked everything fast. I mean, the go-kart deal was, I was the one that wouldn't stop at the intersection and kept going so I could beat everybody until a car ran over me. So,
ouch.
So, you know, I was always kind of fearless. And so one thing led to another. And after the go-karts and dirt bike racing and all that stuff, I ended up driving a stock car, and they were pretty rough old cars at Watsonville Speedway, quarter-mile dirt track. I started there. My dad had two body shop guys, his manager and the manager's brother, and they built a stock car, and neither one of them were brave enough to race it, and they almost made it too nice to race it. So I'm the one that put all the dents in it. So.
Ouch. All right. Well, you talked about blowing through intersections. What's the fastest speeding ticket you've ever got?
I got arrested for exhibitionist speed. I took a top fuel car and drove it on Scotts Valley Drive and nobody knows how fast I went. I mean, I went 170, 180 miles an hour, but they just arrested me for exhibitionist speed. I did get stopped several years ago. I got stopped in a 959 on a road going to Monterey, one of the back roads through the farm country. And there was a high patrolman sitting on the overpass, and he stopped me, and the radar showed I was going 168 miles an hour on a 50-mile-an-hour two-lane road. So I got a ticket for that. I didn't get a ticket for 168. It's autumn in California, twice the speed limit is go to jail. Luckily, I kind of knew everybody and got out of that. But yeah, 168 miles an hour. So.
That's amazing. All righty. So, folks, here's one thing I found really interesting about Bruce. I did not know this until, honestly, just a couple of years ago, that Bruce has quite a history of the Pikes Peak Hill Climb, but it may not be what you think of as far as vehicles. Tell us about big rig racing.
Well, I went to Pikes Peak in 1980 with an open wheel car in the unlimited class. And we did really well there that year, and we had the qualifying record, and we ended up finishing second because I hit a spectator that walked across the road that didn't hear the turbo car. And we ended up second. So I really didn't go back after that. First of all, Bobby Unser got my car outlawed for the next year. He didn't like how quick it was. So he had Pikes Peak change the rules so that car had to run 1 turbo instead of 2 and had to weigh 1,500 pounds. It actually weighed 1,000 with a twin turbo Porsche motor on the back. And he got all the rules changed, so that car was obsolete after 1 year. And then in 2000, I went back and drove for Kenworth. There was a truck class up there, and they had been racing, and they wanted to win. And they had me test the truck. And the gentleman that was racing it he was ready to step aside because it was a little bit frightening in that thing to go that fast up the mountain. So I did testing in it, and we changed some things in it to fit my style. And we went up there, and of course, the first year there, we took 2 minutes off the course record. I really got the truck. I drove the truck like it was a sprint car. I had 6 years in sprint cars, and I loved those cars, and I loved how you drive them because you really drive them with the throttle all the time. And so we got the truck to where I could, fly it into the corner and pick up the throttle and rotate around and keep going and not have to try and, slow it down as much as the other guys and keep the momentum up. So, yeah, so we did that. We did that 3 years total. 2 years in a 2-axle truck, and then 1 year in 2 years in a 3-axle truck, and then 1 year in a 2-axle truck, and we had the records, God, forever. So
that to me is amazing, but I understand that also kind of tied into Kanepan concept, which is a tractor or an 18-wheeler vehicle. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, when I grew up, my dad, he had dealerships. I grew up in the car business. So I really loved all the cars. Well, he was also a truck dealer for International Trucks. And I also liked big trucks. I always thought they were the coolest things. And in the early 80s, I started doing design stuff for trucks, and there was a chief engineer at Kenworth, and we worked together and really created the first real aerodynamic truck, and with full side skirts and no exhaust pipes on the top, and really aero looking mirrors and bumpers, and that became a production truck, the T600 Kenworth, and then the rest is history. So I was doing design work on trucks, and at the same time we had a company in Fresno that I have still that was building the big trailers that the teams were using for motorsports, and we same thing. I wanted the trailers to be more aero and smoother and cleaner looking everywhere, not look like a freight trailer. So it was just a normal combination to work on both, and we still do. I did Kenworth design work with them for almost 17 years for their new trucks, and then we're just too busy now to do any more of that, and they're well on their way anyway. But yeah, I've always liked big trucks, and I think they're just big cars anyway, so they need to look cool.
With you there, and you're talking to the right audience here in Texas. So one of the things that is an amazing history, I think most folks know what a 959 is, but one of my loves is for business and how you make things happen that aren't supposed to happen or somebody is against happening. I'd love to hear, for one, you had the first 959 in the country and apparently came in rather unimpeded. Can you tell us about how you wound up getting that car?
Yeah, I mean, actually, the first car, that was in 1987, and the car came in on a tourist visa. I had a friend and a sponsor and stuff, and so he had a 959, and that's how it got here. And then basically, I think I drove it for pretty close to a year. On a tourist visa, cars allowed to be here for a year. And Rudy had come over with his family to spend their time, and I drove a 959. So, and when we were all done, I ended up selling that car to Paul Allen, and Paul had bought other cars from me before. And so he took it back to Europe. So when it had to leave the country, he took it to Europe. and basically came right back to me and said, "You need to get one of these for Bill and Bill Gates." And Bill Gates wasn't really a car guy, but Paul figured this is a car he could drive. It's easy to drive. It's cool. And so I ended up getting one for Bill, and then it just kind of snowballed from there. I mean, in a short period of time, we had at least 10 or 12 or so of those cars parked in a foreign trade zone in Oakland and San Francisco, both in warehouses. And we were trying to figure out how to make them legal so we could drive them on the street. And we just, I'm the kind of guy that will not take no for an answer. And we went from one person that said no to the next, and we ended up with a law firm in Washington, D.C. And they basically evaluated what we were trying to do and came back and said they thought they could basically create a bill and go to Congress with it. And that's what we did. We created a bill that went to Congress, and that allowed that car to be legalized with, if it was emissions legal, it wouldn't have to have all the DOT work done. And of course, it really allowed other cars to follow that same process. It was cars that were not built for the United States and typically less than 500 in production, although that's not an exact limit, and historically or technically significant. So the 959 was a pretty important piece of engineering when it came out, and we got that approved that way. And then of course, since then, the McLaren F1 and Bugattis and Jaguar XJ220s, and I think there's at least 20 other Porsches now that have come through under show or display. The new Chiron's a show or display car. The new McLaren Speedtail show or display, and allows manufacturers to bring very, very limited quantities of cars. Cars are going to build in limited quantities to this country without crash testing them and doing all that extra work. And so it's turned out to be that effort was well worth it at this point.
Well, thanks for that, because yes, I do know a few folks with cars that fit that category. What do you think is the next car we're really going to capitalize and use that law?
Well, it's the T50. It's Gordon Murray's car. We've already, I'm involved with that car. We already put together a package, sent it to National Highway Traffic Safety. They reviewed it and they've approved it. So when that car is produced, which will be first quarter of next year, then you'll see the T50, the new Gordon Murray car, on the roads in America. And pretty incredible car, actually. So
fantastic. Gordon Murray, if you're not familiar with it, is big in racing design aspects, things like these. This is one of the cars that he's designed and had obviously a big push into it. But
yeah, he originally designed the McLaren F1, the center seat car, when he was at McLaren, and that's when he was the chief engineer and designer of McLaren for F1. And most of his career has been in F1 and multiple championships. He's really a genius when it comes to cars in lots of areas, not one or two. So the McLaren, that goes back to the 90s, that car, and he decided it was time to build a new McLaren F1 basically. And it's, of course, he's on his own now. He has his own company, and this T50 is an amazing car. It'll weigh approximately 2,200 pounds, have just under 700 horsepower, normally aspirated car, a V12 with a 12,100 RPM rev limit to it, 6-speed manual transmission, all analog, no hybrid, no gizmos. I mean, it's a driver's car.
That's going to be great. There are so few of those left that we get to have here in the U.S. I think of the GT2 as being some of the last of that. One of the other things that is there an unimported car right now that's on your wish list besides that one, obviously?
I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think so. It'll not yet. Anyway.
We'll get to that. If you think of it later, we'll get back to that. But the other thing you mentioned, Bobby having a Bobby Rahal, or you said was it Rahal or Unser that impeded?
Unser. Yeah.
Unser. Yeah. Lost a good one this year.
Yeah.
Do you have any stories about y'all's relationship there that you could share?
I think the best, I knew Bobby for a long time because I drove sprint cars. So when I was young, I went to IndyCar races and stuff while I was driving the other cars. And Bobby was one of the people that I'd built trailers in our trucks and trailers went to a lot of the teams. So when it was when Unzers were hooked up with Gallus and stuff, of course, we were building equipment. So Bobby would invite me to the races, and Bobby was hilarious. He would provide everybody tickets, right? He'd have all these tickets, and he would tell you, with this ticket, don't hand it to the guy and don't let him take it out of your hand and don't show it to him for very long. And Bobby had all these printing shops around the country making him tickets. And so he could hand out tickets to all his friends. It was hilarious. And the other best story about Bobby was when we showed up at Pikes Peak in 1980 with the open wheel car. Al Sr. came over, and Al and Bobby are 180. They're just completely opposites. Al is so calm and laid back, and and Bobby's just revved up all the time. And Al came over to our trailer at Tech and looked at the car, walked all around it, and was looking at it and asking questions, because it was an unlimited open wheel car, and it had a twin turbo Porsche motor hanging out the back of it. And they could tell, he could tell looking at it, it was pretty light. There wasn't much there. It was really, really lightweight. I mean, it weighed 1,000 pounds ready to go. So Al looked at it and he had questions here and there. And then Al, he walked away and went out and comes back with Bobby and Bobby's walking around the car, and Al had 10 questions. Bobby's got 100 questions. What's this? Why is that? What's that for? How's this work? All this stuff. And there was an extra handle in the car because I had a steering brake, and Bobby had no idea what that was or how that worked. He wanted a complete rundown on how that steering brake worked. So we get all done. Bobby's kind of walking around this thing multiple times, and you can tell he's nervous that this might be as fast as the cars they brought, because he had a car for Al Jr. there. They had a car for Bobby Jr. there. And so he's walking around, and I'll never forget it. Al looks at Bobby and he says, "I told you somebody'd show up someday with something that's going to kick your ass." and it just set Bobby off. I mean, he just stormed out of the trailer and he was all upset, and it only took him one day to protest my car. He protested my car before we ever hardly got going with the thing. So that was Bobby. That's the way he was. He was competitive as you could be. If he thought somebody could beat him, he was going to get him out of the way as soon as possible.
Absolutely. That's something else, with your background around those cars and Pikes Peak International Hill Climb. We've had some guests on this series. Tell us about, for one, such a big rig going up what was actually a dirt road in your day without much for guardrails.
Well,
how did you fit your cojones in that truck to go up that road?
The truck was interesting because it is a full-size 3-axle truck, and it weighed about 13,000 pounds, ready to go. It had an 18-liter Caterpillar engine in it, twin turbo. It made just short of 2,000 horsepower, made 4,300 foot-pounds of torque. So it had plenty of power. It had plenty of forward traction. It had 8 wheels and tires spinning on it. And for me, once we got it balanced to where I could rotate it around and really use the throttle to drive it, more than the steering wheel to hang on, it was just a big sprint car. I mean, a really big sprint car. And yeah, I drove it. I had axles off the edges everywhere. And, there was plenty of close calls in practices before. We tore it up a couple times figuring out how to control it. I had a couple of big shunts in the thing, but once we got it down, I mean, it was just a sprint car on steroids, and it was fast. It was 100 miles an hour in the straightaways, that truck, and it was a pretty incredible thing to drive. It was very stable. It sat through the corners flat, because I would just drive it in the corner and pick up the throttle, let it rotate, and get back in the gas again and drive it exactly how you drive a sprint car or another dirt car. So it was pretty cool.
That's interesting. I know the Big Rig racing series in Mexico has a huge following down there. Kind of surprised we don't have that kind of following here, considering how much we depend on it for transportation purposes. But some of the other things about the hill climb that amaze me is how the different engines and the tuners around those tune those to make it from the 8,000 at Manitou Springs to the peak at 12. Are there different considerations with what you were having to deal with on that truck?
Yeah, the engine that they had in the truck, they had done tuning on that engine somewhere where it was 15,000 feet, because you actually start at 9,000 feet at the starting line and you go to 14,000 some odd feet when you're at the finish. And and you're going to lose power. There's no question. As you get up the hill, the power starts to fall off. But you know, they had done that engine based on running it in the altitude, not running it down at sea level. So it was, you know, and with those kind of torque numbers, that makes up for a lot. You know, that really helps. So.
It really does. It really does. All righty. I want to loop back to the 959 because, like somebody else who has coined the phrase re-imaged, you're doing this to the 959s now. Can you tell us about how you're freshening up this icon of the road?
Well, you know, it's interesting because when I first experienced this car back in the late 80s, we realized when that car came out, that car was really 25, 30 years ahead of its time. I mean, the 6-speed gearbox and twin turbo and all-wheel drive, and you know, it had upper and lower control arms, which Porsche's just now putting on the 992. It didn't have McPherson struts. It had coilovers and upper and lower control arms. It was really advanced car, and that was the whole purpose of the project. The project was to prove that the 911 had a future, because at that point in time they were going to discontinue the 911. It was a decision that was coming up at the board, and they were going to build front engine water cooled cars like the 924, 944, 928. And really, Peter Schutz, who was the new president of Porsche at that time, he had come from Cummins Engine Company, and Dr. Bach, they basically decided, you know, we think this is wrong, and let's build a car that proves to the board that there's a long life left in the 911. And thank God they did that, because the 911 is one of the greatest cars today of all sports cars still. And so they built that car based on basically proving a point. And it was so advanced that it really didn't show any signs of an old car in terms of anything it did for a long time. And then during the years, we upgraded performance. Obviously, we started out, we had to make them emissions legal anyway for show and display. So our first round, we were at 560 plus horsepower, 100 more than stock. And then we just kept building from there. Our next round, we were at almost 700 horsepower. And as we did these cars, you know, we upgraded lots of things in the cars, subtle things to make them better. We didn't re-engineer the car, the suspension and the transmission and the drivetrain systems, the all-wheel drive. It's still today exactly as it was built. It's just awesome. And so we got to a point, I don't know how many years ago now, probably 5 years ago, where we said we're starting to see failures on things like all cars based on just stuff's timed out, you know, whether it's hoses, gaskets, plastic in the HVAC systems, plastic and other things, just from age. And I tell people, cars in California really have the best life. They have the least amount of deterioration of anywhere in the world. And we were even seeing it in California cars to where things were starting to just, you know, deteriorate from age, not from mileage. It could be 2,000 mile car or a 50,000 mile car. It didn't matter. So we took my car actually, and we disassembled the whole car down to the tub and really evaluated every system in the car. We looked at HVAC systems and power steering, the brake systems and fuel systems, and we went all through the whole car. And we were already working on upgrades for the engine because there were better turbos and better engine management systems. And I think Motec's on its like 7th version in engine management. So we decided to, you know, do a reimagined version, you know, our version of it. And we took my car and rebuilt everything in it and got it done. And then from there, we decided we would build a limited edition of these cars, where, you know, no more than 50. I'm not sure we'll ever get enough cars to build 50. We're at about 15 now done, or close to completion already, all sold to customers. But now we're taking them down to a bare tub. We get rid of the oil door on the left side for the suspension because we have conventional coilovers in it with titanium springs and Penske shocks. We made new wheels because they came with 17s, and they were originally supposed to have 18s. The car was designed, if you look at the concept car, it has an 18-inch wheel on it. But when they got to production by 87, there wasn't an 18-inch tire yet. So they had to take a step back and go to 17s. We're now making an 18-inch wheel, and same process, hollow spoke, magnesium, optimized engineering, TUV tested. We're doing an 18-inch wheel for the car because, you know, you can't get 17-inch tires anymore anyway, good ones. So we're doing that. And then we've upgraded the brakes to all floating rotors and larger rotors since we have a larger wheel. We rem all the gears in the gearbox in the front differential, and you know, we go through all. We've remolded all the hoses in the car. We've upgraded the wiring harnesses. We've rebuilt the HVAC system, the power steering system, and it's almost all the original components that have been upgraded by other manufacturers through the years from their suppliers. So we want the car to remain a 959. The idea was not to build something different. You don't need to. That's one of the best cars in the world. And so that's what we did. And then the engines, we've really done a lot with the engines. We've changed the connect. There's still a 2.85 liter engine basically, but we've changed the connecting rods and the pistons, and the heads are ported and polished, and new valves and new cams and solid lifters and equal length headers and titanium muffler exhaust system and modern Borg Warner turbos. No more distributor. It's all coil packs, and it's the latest Motec and the latest harnesses and everything. So new ignition system. I mean, there's not a thing in the engine that's not updated except for the architecture. It's the original Porsche architecture. And a lot of people don't realize that engine really started life as the engine that was going to be at Indianapolis in the late 70s. And then that was stillborn. The USAC was afraid of Porsche and put a boost restriction on. That car never ran. And then that engine was used in the first 936, and then eventually 956 and 962 and GT1. So it's that same engine, air-cooled cylinders, water-cooled 4-valve heads. That's the engine. So it was always designed to be a powerful engine. And the other part that was important is when the car was originally designed, you know, it was called a Group B car in the very beginning, and then they decided not to let those cars run. But it was designed as a Group B platform. And from Porsche engineering, that platform was designed to be 825 horsepower. And so we don't have a car that has failures because we're overpowering it or overdriving it. It was designed to be there. And our engine now, our latest version of the engine, is basically making 850 horsepower on pump gas and 600 plus foot-pounds of torque. So it's pretty amazing piece. And it, compared to other modern supercars, I mean, it's a 2.5-second car to 60, if that's what's important, and it's a 9-second quarter-mile car. But the reality is it's so drivable. It's smooth as glass. Doesn't spin the tires because it's all-wheel drive. I mean, it spins them, but it goes dead straight. You don't need to be hanging on and trying to keep the thing straight. It's an effortless car, and it's still a 6-speed manual transmission, you know, and no traction control aids. And I mean, it has ABS, and that's it. Everything else is analog in the car, so it makes for a heck of a car to drive. We've lowered the weight down. They're down to 3,000 pounds now with things we've lightened up. So it's a pretty great combination of a car.
Oh, that's fantastic. I definitely know of two here in the Austin, Texas, Central Texas area, possibly a third. So I think you've just about sold us on this. What does it cost for such a thing?
You know, it's really dependent on the price of the donor car. We're buying 959s to build these. In fact, I just bought one in Texas from somebody, and it's all a part here we're doing. And the donor price really kind of determines what the total car is. But right now, our complete upgrade, first of all, our average is 4,300 hours a car. Every single component in the car is rebuilt, restored, refurbished, and upgraded. Every piece of hardware is replated. Everything that was painted in the chassis is powder coated. Every piece of aluminum is hard anodized if it's aluminum. I mean, we've taken it to another level in fit and finish, although it's the same look as what Porsche did in finishes. And then the tubs are stripped to a bare tub and then completely restored. And we're doing custom colors. We've done tangerine and oak green metallic and emerald green metallic and granite and silver, liquid metal silver and navy blue, and you know, we're doing all the Porsche PTS colors on all these cars. It's really awesome. And the interior is all new interior, and every piece in it is covered in leather. From the headliner down, it's all leather. And so we are putting 4,300 hours average in doing these cars, rebuilding them. And then the components and parts are, you know, another $350,000+ in terms of what we do in materials. So the conversion cost to take one and rebuild it and become a 959, a Canepa reimagined one, it's $1,050,000 is what the invoice is when it's all said and done. So.
Alrighty. Well, that question came from John in the audience. Feel free to throw in your questions into the chat there, and I'll get them into the conversation. Well, I don't know if John is one of the guys that owns one of them, but sounds like a good deal to me, John. Hope you can pull that off and give me a ride. All righty. So some of the things that I always love about the 959, it's iconic, and how some of them, John says, I wish. I do too. So some of them, you know, have been a kit car version of it put out on the road, and that just kills me. And so I was walking through one of the garages at Circuit of the Americas, and I walked up to one, and I'm like, hey, this is a really nice looking one. Well, it turned out to be authentic, and I think it had 1,800 kilometers on it. So get out there and drive. We got a guy now here with Bruce that he can take care of it if you do put more miles on it.
Yeah, that's what's nice. It's a driver's car. It, you know, a lot of cars, I call a lot of the modern supercars 1 hour cars, because you go out in about an hour, you're ready to go back and get your sedan or your other car, your truck, whatever, you know. And the 959 is a Porsche, and you get in, you're comfortable, and you got great visibility, and everything's in the right place in the car, the pedals and the gauges and the steering wheel, and you drive half a day with zero fatigue. So that's what Porsches are all about. So it's, you know, I tell guys, it really is a 911 on steroids. So, you know, it drives as good as all the rest of them every day. So
fantastic. Well, I know one of my broadcast partners just took delivery of one of your roof 993s that you put together. And I'll say it sounded great blowing by me. I haven't got to get in it yet, but tell us about the relationship with that.
Well, you know all about Roof. I mean, Alois has done incredible things with Porsches, and you know, I mean, now he's building a new car, as you know, and I'm on that list. I can't wait to get that car. That'll be an awesome car. I have a 993 Roof Turbo R in my collection. I mean, he's built some awesome cars, and he's you know, his focus is similar to mine in terms of, you know, if the car doesn't work, don't do it, you know. And when he's done with the car, it has performance and handling, and it does everything it's supposed to do. It doesn't just look pretty, it actually works. So I think that's critical in cars.
One of the things that I enjoy, I want to go back to your shop walks. That is a regular thing for me to see, and kind of sit there with bated breath to see what comes up next and what I see in the background. Almost as interesting as what you have in the foreground. But in your shop, what is wait time like just to get it in the door? It always looks busy and crowded to me.
Yeah, to say the least. In fact, tell all your audience we're hiring left and right. I mean, we're short. I think we have 60 people, and we're short 10 to keep up, just to even start to keep up. So we need guys in the body shop, the upholstery shop, the mechanical shop, the motorsports department. We're short of people everywhere. We're at a point now where there's on average 60 projects in the shop. That's what the project board looks like every day. And I remember when we started in this building, I said, well, you know, probably 30 projects will be a huge number, and hell, we're double that. So and you know, the nice thing is we do everything in house, so it allows us to control our timelines and push a lot harder, because we're pushing ourselves. In the shops, we have complete fabrication shop where we do all the machining, metal forming, everything in fabrication is done there. And then we have all our paint work's done in house, all the composite work, all our body work, all our upholstery work, and all our mechanical. So really the only thing we send out is plating, you know, whether it's nickel or chrome or anodized or zinc, and we send plating processes. We do everything else here. And it allows us to be more efficient, because the body could be in the restoration shop, and the guys are over there working on the mechanical parts, and the upholstery guys doing the upholstery pieces. He could be doing the seats and the door panels and the trim pieces and the dash. And you know, normally restorers and guys that rebuild cars, you know, they can't do it all. So the car leaves, and when it's at the upholstery shop, they're stopped. And when it goes to another shop, if they're not a body shop, they're stopped. And in this shop, we got all the departments working on all this stuff all at the same time. And it allows us to control, especially me, because I'm a control freak. It allows us to control every step of the process as it relates to quality and finish and design. And that's critical to me, because I look at stuff that nobody else sees every day. So, and my guys know that. They laugh about it, because, you know, it's just who I am. So.
Well, that's the kind of person I want building my Porsche. But if you've got a floor sweeper position open, I think I can manage that. But audience, want to invite you. Here's a great chance. Like I said, I'm enjoying getting to know Bruce more, and I want to invite you to participate, throw out your questions. I'll get them into our conversation here. Bruce, here we are in Austin, Texas. Circuit of the Americas is sitting here. I believe I've seen your truck here, but we never crossed paths. What's your experience around Circuit of the Americas, or when will you get here?
You know, I haven't driven Circuit of America. I've been there, but I've never driven it. You know, we're spoiled out here. We got Laguna Seca and we got Sonoma, and you know, and Circuit of Americas wasn't a course that raced back when I drove 935s or 962s. It didn't exist. But I came there for the first Formula One race, and it's an amazing facility, no question. And but you know, I tell guys, I mean, I like all kinds of racetracks. I like the challenge to learn them and figure it out, and some you like better than others, depending on how good you do. But that's quite a facility.
Fantastic. Well, we have a historic weekend going on this weekend. I know if you're not live in the audience, you're hearing this after the weekend, but this is the first time NASCAR is going to race on a current Formula One spec track, and they're visiting this weekend with everything imaginable and the Lamborghini Trofeo, who we've seen before. But that is historic in its own making. All righty, Richard's got a question for you. Bruce, what is your favorite racing story?
God, what's my favorite racing story? So I was driving a sprint car for the Snows. They owned dirt champ cars and regular sprint cars, and I was driving one of their sprint cars at a place called Calistoga one night, and it was a big race. There was a lot of guys. Now that's not a winged racetrack back then. They didn't allow wings, so but it's a 5/8 mile oval. It's really fast track, pretty damn dangerous. Unfortunately, it's bit a few guys, a number of guys, but it's as good a racetrack or as much fun as anything you could drive on. I like those big ovals, the fast ones. So I was driving Snow's car, and unfortunately they had crashed their really good car. Somebody had crashed it earlier, so I ended up in their shortened dirt champ car, which was really an antique. I mean, it was a car that Foyt had driven in the 60s, and it had a bolt-on roll cage. So it was just a roll bar car before they put a cage on it. So God knows if that cage would have stayed there if I'd have turned it over, but they built a cage and bolted it on the car. So I was in that car because that's what they had to drive. And the car worked so good, I couldn't believe it. I mean, I was, you know, kind of like thinking, this is going to be a horrible race, you know, and Steve Kiser was in the race, and really a bunch of really good guys were in the race, and Kiser was fast, and Leland McSpadden was the other guy that did really well at that track, and I knew Leland, so it became a 3-person race. It was Kiser and McSpadden and myself, and we switched up the front position I don't know how many times in the last 20 laps of a 50-lap race, and I was just kind of laughing to myself because no matter what they did and did a slide under me or around me or tried, I just drove back by him. This damn car I was driving it was so good I couldn't believe it. I mean, because it shouldn't have been that good, and it was just awesome. So we got down to the last lap, and when I was going down the back straightaway, before I got to the back straightaway, going through 1 and 2, I could tell it was starting to tie up, and the problem was the motor was a little bit tired. They had put some nitro in it to pick up the power. And on lap 49, lap 50, last lap, as I went down the back straightaway, the car I'm in, I was leading, and it just exploded. And it was just a ball of fire, and parts were going out everywhere. And luckily it had a screen. Calistoga has a lot of rock in the track, it used to. So everybody had a screen on the front of the car in the big opening of the cage. And you wore arm pads on your right arm and your shoulder because the rocks were pretty nasty. So this thing exploded, and the parts are going everywhere. And I was leading, and McSpadden was behind me, and a connecting rod hit McSpadden's screen on his car, fell through the screen and turned his ignition switch off. They turned it off, and Kiser won from third. And McSpadden came over afterward and handed me the connecting rod and said, "This is yours." I said, I said, hey, what can I say? I said, I should have won anyway. I said, you guys weren't going to win that thing. So that was an amazing night, I'll tell you. So.
All right. Oh, man, that sounds great. Okay, now we already know that Bruce is known to cause a little trouble on the street. And so I recently saw a video, and we have Mikkel and Jonathan are kind of referencing the same car. Your 917. Tell us what it's like to drive one on the street, and what is just really what's the sensation of driving that car?
Well, they're amazing cars. I mean, it's hard to imagine when you think this is a car that was built in 1969, and at Laguna Seca in the historics. I mean, the thing is, I race one quite a bit, and they're extremely fast and work really well. They do everything really well. And when you look at a lap time of one, I mean, I've gone under a minute 30 at Laguna, and when you consider a modern car goes a minute 24 or 25, it's just shocking. But you know, they got their big torque and they're lightweight, and the chassis just worked fabulous. They do everything you want to do. So, you know, driving one down the street, it's easy. You know, they're synchro mesh transmission. They idle. They don't get hot. They're air cooled motor. They're not the most comfortable thing. You almost lay down in it. They're so short to the ground. If you look at the floor to ceiling in that car, it's pretty shallow. But yeah, it's easy to drive. You know, there's one in Europe that gets driven on the street. It's been plated since the 70s. And it belonged to Count Rossi of Martini Rossi. He bought one as a street car and drove it as a street car for years. And now another person owns it and drives it as a street car. So that was a car we had restored. We had just finished it. We had just sold it. So I was out doing shakedowns with it. Just, yeah, hey, it's got headlights, it's got turn signals, got brake lights. You know, it's under FIA rules. They even had a passenger seat. Nobody could ever fit in it, but it had a passenger seat. So it's, I mean, and the sound in a 917 is like nothing else. I mean, that gear driven fan that's on 917 engines and 908 engines and 935 motors, that's a sound all of its own. And then separate of that 917 engine, you know, if it makes a normally aspirated 917 is about 640 horsepower, sounds like it has 2,000. The turbo engine has 1,000 horsepower, sounds like it has 3,000. And they're just amazing. They're so well balanced, so neutral. You could never imagine this car is that old. I mean, 50 years old. I mean, nobody would believe that's a 50-year-old car the way it performs today.
Oh, that's amazing. All right, Jason has a question for you. Bruce, what is the most surprising driver's car that he's driven that was unexpectedly good?
God, let me think. I've driven so many things. I have to think about that one a minute.
I'll tell you the one I forgot, and that's because I just had one in my place, was the 924S, the 1989 924S. I forgot how good those were. Yes, they're absolutely underpowered, but wow, that was a great little car.
Yeah.
We've got a question. Go ahead, sir. We've got a question from Justin. Which new roof did you order? CTR Anniversary Image Yellowbird?
Yes.
Simple answer. There you go. Straight. Great. Some of the others, questions about the truck. How much adaptation did it take you to get into the truck and drive it? It sounds like it was very much like the Sprint car, but what were things that just really got it to dial in and be that giant Sprint car?
Well, you know, when I first tested it, it was way overweight on the front end. I had to relocate the engine as far back as they could, and ended up with like a 10-inch drive line in it. So the engine was about in the center, and then we also I had them, you know, drill all the wheels, because those Alcoa wheels are like a 1/4 inch thick on a truck wheel. So I had them drill all the wheels, and we bolted the tires to the rims. We had Bridgestone make the tires 4-ply or 6-ply rather than 16-ply. And, you know, I only ran 12, 14 pounds of air in the rear tires because there's 8 of them, and the front's like 30. And that way I could really get some side bite and stuff. We were grooving tires. The guys from Bridgestone, I bet they grooved 300 tires. I know a lot. I lost count because I would have them change siping tires different ways. I had tires grooved to try to get just side bite. I had tires grooved to get forward traction, inside tires forward traction, outside tires for side bite. We just went crazy on tire stuff because it made such a difference. And then we went to Utah. We found a place in Utah with a similar road, not any safer either. We didn't have anything up there if something would have happened. And we tested for 2 or 3 days there. Then we went to Pikes Peak. Doesn't give you a lot of time to practice. We went to Pikes Peak and practiced there. And during race week, you get to run on 1/3 of the mountain each day. So each day you do the bottom third, the center third, the top third, and on race day you got to put it all together. You never get to race the whole thing or practice the whole thing till you get to race day. So it was just a lot of seat of the pants and experience and comfort level with being really loose, because the truck, if you're comfortable with the truck really loose, the thing worked pretty good. And if you've watched any of the video, I drove it pretty loose. So
It is. That's scary. Having been up that road a few times just in a regular street car back in when it was all dirt, that was enough for my passengers anyway. So a lot of things are going on. Your business is growing. There's a lot of demand. Like I said, so many projects. Do you have any new projects coming up that going to bring some new swagger to the shop?
Well, we got a number of things going on. I mean, right now we're restoring the last GT40 Ford. It'll be at Pebble Beach, and we've never restored a GT40 here. I've always loved those cars. We've never had that opportunity, so we're really excited. The car is coming out spectacular, and it'll be on the lawn in August at Pebble. And then the other thing that's cool is we're gonna, we've restored now 6 917s total, and Pebble Beach is going to have a special class just for 917s this year. And I think we have 4 of those cars that we restored will be there. From the Can-Am Championship car, the Sunoco Mark Donohue car, the George Fulmer L&M car that was a Penske Can-Am Championship car from '72. 2 of the Inter Series cars. So we'll have a full house of 917s in that class at Pebble Beach, which is cool. And then the other thing we're doing is, of course, 959 is the shop we're building right now. We've got 3 more starting or 4 more starting very shortly. We've got 2 in the queue and 2 more coming. So that's a nonstop thing with the 959s. We're building a Cadillac right now, a complete custom. And it's one of our regular customers. He's got a lot of cars, a lot of great cars, great Formula One cars, Group C cars, supercars. I mean, he's got all this stuff, and he wanted to have one custom. So we got a '67 Cadillac Eldorado. We've reshaped all the fenders on it, and the rear bumper, the front bumper, the grills. I mean, there's 1,000 hours of metal forming in the car, changing shapes, and it's coming out awesome. And we made a 20-inch wheel that looks like the 15-inch hubcap, but it's the wheel all machined to look like a hubcap. And lowered real suspension, 6-piston brakes on the front, 4-piston on the rear. The interior is Alcantara and Stingray. The thing, and cars black pearl, and we've never done a custom. I didn't even draw it. I just in my head knew what we needed to do, and we're having a blast doing that thing. It is really cool. We're all pretty excited about it. And that's something we just don't do typically, and so that's in process. The other thing that's fun we're doing is we've done 3 of them now. 934 Porsches were really not far from a street car. I mean, they had door panels and door boxes and power windows. They had the thin carpet in them, the very thin carpet, looked like trunk material almost. They had a carpeted looking thin carpet, the felt kind of dash, but they had a headliner. They had all the windows in them in glass, steel doors, steel fenders, but they had the add-on flares, front and rear, and spoilers. So that was Porsche's first turbocharged race car for customers, and they built 30 some of those cars. They're not very practical for historic racing because the 935 just will dust that car, put it in the weeds. There's no comparison from the late 935. So we've been turning those into street cars, and we did a Vauxhall Pollock car that a gentleman has up in the Seattle area. We did an Interscope car, a black one that's back at Monticello. That gentleman at Monticello has it. And I did one for Seinfeld. He has an orange one. It was Continental orange. We found that car in Greece. And we tried to start with 934s that were never cut up or modified. And original engines, everything, which is hard to find because most of them became 935s eventually. So we won't get to do many of those, but Jerry drives his all the time. They're absolutely fabulous car. We change the gearing, we change the turbo, we put a passenger seat. You know, the car's got door locks, it's got power windows. In one car, we put heat and air conditioning in it for the customer. I'm building one right now in my shop. It's the Sunoco blue one that you see on the shop walk. So that one is a 934.5. That car started life as a 34.5. 34.5 had 935 suspension, 935 brakes, 935 engine. So it looks like a 934, but it had all the others. So it'll be a 700 horsepower street car, that car. And they're just a blast because they sound like a 935. They look just, you know, they look really nasty, like you wouldn't mess with that car. They sound like you don't want to mess with the car, and they drive great. So we're having fun doing those cars too.
That is so fantastic. All right, we got 2 questions, and I think we'll be wrapping up on our time limit for you. Thanks again for this time. I'm having a great time. Good question. What is the most undervalued Porsche that you suggest folks look at and consider?
Well, I think the G50 cars are way undervalued. I mean, if you look at the Porsches, you know, 86, 87, 80, 89, those are great cars. We have a 10,000 mile one in our shop that just got here. And I mean, they're fabulous cars, and they're not a lot of money yet. I mean, not relative to everything else, they're really not. And I tell guys that you get in that car and it's got a great sound, handles great, drives great, looks great. And I honestly think that any great one you can buy under $100,000, really original, low mileage, nice one is worth buying. And those things will double in no time. They're a lot of car for the money.
Oh, that's great. All righty, here is our trademark question that we ask all our guests. So here you are, you're in Austin, Texas. We're about to head out through the hill country. There's some nice hills, some tight curves, some long straights, going after some good barbecue. What's in your garage right now that you'd want to drive with us?
959.
Short answer.
It's simple. All-wheel drive, that car's got grip and everything. Every road that car's fun on, period.
There you go. Okay, I want to be passenger in that run. All righty. Bruce, thanks again for joining us here with the Hill Country region and our partner regions around the state of Texas and Speed City here. Thanks again for your time. It's great getting to know you. I appreciate it. I want everyone to stand by. We still don't have our guest to announce for our next one. I'll say that we're trying to get his schedule sorted out to match closely with ours. But Bruce, thanks again. I look forward to visiting you next time I'm out in the Bay Area, and we'll get a better friendship going.
Yeah.
Thanks again, sir.
I look forward to having you come out, and anybody that's out in this area, please visit. We great
Alrighty.
shops, everything. People enjoy it all the time.
You bet. Awesome. We got a quick word from Charlie Sparks. Charlie, how was this? Wasn't it a fun night?
Oh, this was awesome, Bruce. Thanks so much for your time. I learned a ton tonight, and throughout all your Q&A with Les. I have to admit, and I'll squeal on myself. I was surfing the web, going, okay, let me look this up. Let me look this up. Let me look this up. I mean, it was awesome. So I learned a ton tonight, but I also have a question. And you know, I don't take no for an answer, so I'm going to learn that one from you tonight. So, can you take a 993 instead of a 959 and put it into your 959 reimagined process?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because we are working on building kind of our version of a Singer with a group of guys right now, because people keep asking me to build something like Singer, but I want it to be a better car from a driver standpoint. So we're using the 993 as the platform. It's got a 6-speed, it's got better suspension. It'll be a 4.1 liter engine, 410 horsepower. So yeah, 993 is a great car. It's a fabulous car. It's a great starting point to do things.
I used to own one, and I keep kicking myself that I sold it. Is there a car that you've sold that you wish that you had kept?
Oh yeah. Yeah, are you kidding?
What's at the top of that list?
I'm not sure what's at the top. I owned a GT1 for a long time, and I shouldn't have sold that. I owned a McLaren F1, 2 of those. I shouldn't have sold those. Don't remind me, I'll start crying. But if I hadn't sold those cars, I wouldn't have the cars I have now. So that's just part of it. And I tell everybody, we're all caretakers anyway, in one fashion or another.
You know, that's so true. And I really appreciate you reminding us of that, because you're right. If I hadn't sold my 993, I wouldn't have the cars that I have now.
Yeah.
So you're right. Hey, I appreciate it. And for everyone who's joined tonight, thank you so much. I hope everyone got as much out of it as I did. And Bruce, we appreciate you spending part of your evening with us here tonight. Thank you so much.
Totally my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.